Good morning and welcome to this edition of Morning with Marit. Obviously, I'm not Marit Peters, but it's a privilege to be with you this morning. My name is Lee Loftis. I'm the Chief Legislative Officer here at IIAT, and this session is entitled Legislative Update, Your PAC at Work. I'm really pleased today that my friend Charles Symington is with us. Charles is the Senior Vice President of External Industry and Government Affairs for the Independent Insurance Agents and Brokers of America, known as the Big I. He began with IIABA in 2004 after working on the powerful House Financial Services Committee. Charles knows his way around Washington. He's regularly voted one of the top lobbyists in DC. Charles directs the day-to-day activities of the Big I legislative, political, communications divisions and advises the president and CEO on oversight and administration of our association. Charles graduated from the University of Virginia with a degree in history and received his law degree from Emory University. Outside his role at IIABA, Charles serves on the National Down Syndrome Society, and he and his wife, Kathy, reside in Alexandria, Virginia, with their 3 kids. Charles, thank you, my friend, for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Lee. It's a pleasure.
Let's get started talking about an eventful week in the last 10 days, the election in Virginia and New Jersey, as well as the passage of the infrastructure bill.
Yeah, and I also, of course, want to wish everybody a happy Veterans Day. I want to thank those veterans for their service to our country to protect our freedom. So thanks to all of you. Yeah, let's dive right in. With the passage of that infrastructure bill, last week, passed with the support of 13 House Republicans, which was a little bit surprising. I think, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy is kind of wondering why those 13 Republican members kind of broke ranks and voted for that infrastructure bill. But when you look at those 13 members, it's largely a hodgepodge of some retiring members who, of course, then aren't really accountable to the voters in their districts, and some members from some northeastern states such as New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, where what infrastructure is included in the bill could be important to their districts. And then when you hear the reasoning of some of these members, they would argue that, well, the bill passed in the Senate, and it did garner, I think it was 19 Republican senators supporting it. And so they felt like they weren't necessarily out of line with where the Republican Party was and is. Now, I would argue that the problem with that is that when it was taken up in the Senate, it was on its own, right? It was just the infrastructure bill. But now, the way it's been kind of attached at the hip with the Build Back Better legislation by the president and Democrat leadership, that social spending bill, and the two have been kind of moving in tandem. I'd argue it's a different scenario. And, by passing now infrastructure and by, these Republicans in the House going along with most Democrats, you had the squad, the AOC-led squad vote against it. It was 6 Democrats voting against it. So if all Republicans had kind of stood firm and voted against it, the Democrats would not have been able to pass it. So again, by breaking ranks, these 13 House Republicans now, they've really kind of opened the door to the president and Democrat leadership potentially moving forward with Build Back Better. And I think that the overwhelming majority of Republicans would argue, look, the small amount of good that could have come out of this infrastructure bill doesn't even come close to making up for what the damage that the country could see if Build Back Better is passed into law.
Yeah, Charles, and it seems like to me that, as you said, it's more political than the reality. They did pass it, the infrastructure bill, in a bipartisan manner and all that. Now, the question I have is, it seems like what I've heard is there is a distinct attempt both by the Republicans and the Democrats to separate the two because they weren't getting anywhere with the squads pressuring them to vote for both at the same time, et cetera, et cetera. Is that still kind of the feeling up there, or is it a more uneasy feeling now that the infrastructure bill passed?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, obviously they're not together. They've been broken apart. They were kind of weighing each other down there up until this point, right? Because you had the moderates, the handful, maybe 10 House moderates, the Democrat Party. They really wanted this infrastructure bill, but you had the Progressive Caucus, about 80 strong. They really wanted Build Back Better, and so you kind of had this standoff where the progressives were holding the infrastructure bill hostage, and the moderates were holding Build Back Better hostage. And now that the infrastructure bill has broken loose, and by the way, the president is now scheduled to sign it, I believe, next Monday. So now that's broken loose. You got an agreement by some of these House Democrat moderates who have said, okay, the progressives have played ball with us. They sent a letter to go on the record saying that as long as the CBO score, and this is the Congressional Budget Office score, as long as the bill is scored at what the president has kind of, sold it as, about $1.75 trillion, and that's with a T, not a B, that if the numbers are largely aligned, then they'll vote for it. So now we're just waiting on the CBO score. It sounds like it's going to come out in kind of dribs and drabs. It's not going to all come out at once. But the House could take it up as soon as next week. I don't know if I'd bet on that, the way it's been delayed previously. But, they could potentially take it up before Thanksgiving, and then all the action is going to move back into the Senate. Of course, they won't be taking it up until December. It'll be after the Thanksgiving recess, at the earliest, early December. And then the ball's back in the court of Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona and Joe Manchin from West Virginia. Of course, they've been really slowing this train down, and they're going to get another bite at the apple because Democrats have added some elements to Build Back Better in the House. For example, Family Medical Leave Act, provisions that Senator Manchin has said that he opposes. So it's a little different than what the senators have got on the record saying they could support. So we're still a long way from the finish line, but obviously, if Democrats get this out of the House, it's a big win for them. Moves over to Senate, and then you duke it out in the Senate and see if you can reach agreement between the Bernie Sanders type progressives and obviously Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, who are really kind of holding the line on this bill. Yeah,
and Charles, it seems like to me that the closer we get, if we got past the holidays without any action by either or both houses, then the closer you get to primary days and stuff like that, there's probably going to be less appetite to take a tough vote or whatever. Is that a fair assessment?
I think that's exactly right, Lee. We've seen it. You see it in the state legislative level. We've seen it, kind of seen this movie before at the federal level. I mean, you only have so much time to legislate, right? And as the election approaches, Democrats are going to get really nervous. You typically would, and then you see the results that, we saw in Virginia, New Jersey, and other states last Tuesday. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that, but that certainly puts a little more of the fear of God in them. And so they're going to be even more reluctant to kind of walk the plank on difficult votes as the election, the midterm elections near. And of course, we're only a year away now.
Yeah, and you're a native of Virginia and a resident there, and tell me about how it was last week with the election there.
Yeah, so you kind of saw this building, right? When you looked at some of the polling, at least in Virginia, Glenn Youngkin was closing the gap pretty consistently over the course of the last month or two. As a Virginian, I was happy to vote for him. Even gave a little bit of the Symington piggy bank to support him as well. And you can just tell, looking at yard signs, right? You being a Politico, it's always a pretty good indicator. And I live in Northern Virginia, which is typically pretty blue. And you saw a lot of Youngkin signs, and people were willing to talk about their support for him. So again, you saw this support for him building slowly. But New Jersey was a bigger surprise, right? That only closed late. And so when you really look at the numbers and you look at, how much President Biden won Virginia by in the presidential election, he won Virginia by 10 points. And then, McAuliffe, the Democrat candidate, he lost it by 2. So that's a 12-point swing, pretty big. And then when you look at New Jersey's numbers, President Biden, he won New Jersey by 16 points. And the incumbent governor in New Jersey, Phil Murphy, Democrat, he only won by 3. So that's a 13-point swing. So again, just you can tell the tenor of the voter, and also looking at the presidential approval ratings right now. And President Biden is mired in the low 40s. I've even seen high 30s. And so that was really a drag, on the governor's races and the state legislative races, for that matter, in both states. And so if you're looking forward now to the midterm election, if you're a Democrat House member and you're sitting in a D+10 or less district, you're a little fearful, right? I mean, your district might be in play. And so there are a lot of Democrat districts that are D+10s or less. And so that gives Republicans in the House a real opportunity to go on offense. And I think this probably the smart money right now would be on Republicans regaining control of the House a year from now. I think the question would be, how big is the margin? Will it be a workable, manageable, governable majority? Would it be tighter? Of course, again, with the caveat we're a year away, but we're going to try to play prognosticators here. So I would say the smart money would be Republicans pick up the House. But even though, of course, the environment is just as good for these Senate races as it is for the House, it's a little bit of a different ballgame in the Senate. And that's purely because of the seats that are up in the Senate. Of course, every House seat's up each election, but in the Senate, it's only a third of the seats. And when you look at the third of the Senate seats that are up next year, there's just limited opportunity for Republicans to go on offense. Primarily, they're going on offense in 4 states, Arizona, Nevada, New Hampshire, and Georgia. So those are the 4. And they got to play defense in a couple of states too. Pennsylvania, which is now an open seat, and then Wisconsin, which may or may not be an open seat. And then not so good news for Republicans, just a couple of days ago, their top recruit in New Hampshire, which again is one of their top pickup opportunities, the current Republican governor, Chris Sununu, declined to run for the Senate, which it was somewhat of a surprise. So they're going to have to kind of go back to the drawing board and recruit another credible candidate up there. And so because of those limited opportunities, I think the Senate is largely a pick'em. It's going to be very competitive. It could go either way. Again, the wind will be at Republicans' backs, but because of the chess pieces on the board, there aren't that many of them. I think it's going to be a really close election in the Senate, and it really could come down to the wire to see who controls the Senate, after November of 2022.
That's great. Before we leave the Build Back Better plan, is there anything still in there, or what are some of the things in there that agents should be concerned with, and obviously things that y'all are and have been working on to get protection from?
Yeah, thank you, Lee. We've spent, of course, because that's the big enchilada, right, in DC, and it had such broad impact and will have such broad impact on the economy. We've really focused our advocacy efforts on that bill, and it's been met with some success. I mean, when you all think about, I know many of our viewers saw the press reports on some of these huge tax increases that were included in the original versions of Build Back Better. We were very successful working with other business groups, other industry groups as well, in the insurance industry to eliminate some of these provisions. So, for example, they were considering changes to the 20% small business deduction that so many of our pastors rely on. They were going to institute income thresholds where they were going to phase out this 20% small business deduction above certain income thresholds. We were able to knock that out. And so your 20% small business deduction is intact and is going to operate as is. And then I'm sure you all also heard about these, huge tax rate increases, whether it was on the corporate side, going from 21% to could it be as high as 28 or 26.5. We have about a third of our members that are organized as C Corps. We knocked that out. And then on the pass-through side, they were going to increase that top marginal rate as well from 37 to 39.6. We knocked that out. And then also there were major changes that were afoot, increasing the capital gains tax rate. That was taken out of the bill. Stepped up basis There were going to be changes there. We knocked that out, and then also state and gift tax changes. So, those three in particular, as our members are looking to perpetuate their businesses and leave their assets to their heirs, it was really, really important that we took those out of the bill, and we were very successful there. Now, I'm sure you all also read about there was a new tax reporting regime that was going to be put into place. This is where the community bankers were in an uproar, and we were working with them on this. And Lee, you and I talked about it. You reached out to me because I know that your compatriots and the Texas bankers were really worried about it. It was going to require the sharing of specific account information with the feds, with the IRS, if money inflows and outflows of a de minimis level of $10,000 over the course of a year had occurred. I mean, you would have had a lot of information going to the IRS, so that caused a lot of concern in the financial services industry. We work closely with the banking and credit union groups to knock that out, and we knocked that out. So again, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back too much, but a lot of kind of shoe leather lobbying. We launched grassroots on a targeted basis, drafted a lot of letters, and again worked with other business groups to improve the bill. Now, it's not all peaches and cream, right? This is a huge price tag. They got to raise the money somehow. And so there is the expansion of this net investment income tax, that 3.8% Medicare tax that now is going to also apply to ordinary business income. And so some of our members are probably going to be hit by that. So we're going to keep an eye on the implementation of that provision. Right now the thresholds are at $400,000 for individuals and $500,000 if they're filing jointly. So again, that'll have an impact. There's also a surtax for high income individuals. Don't expect this to hit many of our folks. It's a 5% surtax for AGI exceeding, I think it's 10 million. And then there's an 8% surtax on AGI exceeding 25 million. So again, high thresholds, but it's important to note that for trusts, if your businesses have ownership held in trusts, those thresholds are much lower, and it's 200,000 for the 5% surtax, and it's 500,000 for the 8% surtax. So really important if you have assets organized in trust, take another look at that. And then hitting some of the big corporations, there's the 15% corporate minimum tax on those large corporations. I think it's over $1 billion, so it's certainly not going to impact our members. Might impact some of our markets. And then a 1% surtax surcharge on corporate buybacks. I know a lot of the larger insurance companies were worried about that. So those are kind of the wins and the losses on the pay for tax revenue side. But we also had some wins on kind of non-insurance provisions. There was a kind of a slipped in provision that would have given the Department of Labor more authority over the workers' compensation system, and it would have allowed them to monitor state workers' compensation programs. That caused us a lot of concern. Working with the carrier trades, we knocked that out. Many of you will probably recall there was also a new mandate on smaller employers that have to sign up their employees for IRAs. Knocked that out. And then in some good news, there's some additional funding for the National Flood Insurance Program. I know we're going to talk about that in a little bit, the overall state of the program and risk rating 2.0. But they're going to forgive the debt, and that's about $20.5 billion. And then there's additional funding for mapping, and also additional funding. It's about $600 million for a pilot project for means testing for some of the premiums. So at least there's some slight positive there on the NFIP. Again, we have a long way to go, right? We're not at the finish line, as I mentioned, with the House potentially passing this in the next 2 or 3 weeks, and then the Senate to follow suit. So knock on wood, we're not going to count our chickens just yet, but so far we have improved the bill and made it less onerous for our membership and their clients.
Well, you say you won't pat yourself on the back, but we'll pat you on the back because I know how hard you and your team have worked on that, Charles, and it's very positive to hear the improvements that we made. I think we all still agree that it's a huge financial burden on the country, but at least y'all have done your job. Now, let's move on to another subject that you just mentioned, flood insurance and all, which is about to expire, and give me your feel on what's going to happen, and then let's talk about the risk rating 2.0, because we've had some conversation with some of our members here in Texas that it's causing some problems. So fill us in on where we are.
Thank you, Lee. You bet, and thank you for raising that with us. We always appreciate the communication, obviously with our members, but our state association staff, their members also. And so we really appreciate you. When things like this bubble up, we need to hear about it. And so, of course, you reached out and passed some of that along to us. But so first, in terms of the expiration of the program, it's tied to federal government funding. It's funny, as all the press has been on infrastructure and Build Back Better, there's been less talk about, the federal government potentially shutting down come December 3. So, Democrats are also going to have to fund the federal government past that date. The NFIP will be part of that. So we're seeking a clean extension of the NFIP as part of the federal funding legislation. I think we'll get that done. Again, there's a lot of oxygen being sucked up on these other bills. And that's the other, downside of now Build Back Better being delayed is that it makes it more likely that we may see a kind of an expiration of the NFIP and a shutdown of the federal government. But again, I probably bet that we don't see that, but the chances are increasing. And then the other thing that hasn't been talked about a lot, and this is probably going to come to a head in December, maybe January, is the need to increase the debt limit. Republicans, worked with Democrats most recently a couple of months ago to get that done, and then Mitch McConnell really kind of took it on the chin from our rank and file and kind of from the base. I think Democrats are going to have to do it this time on their own, and so that's another kind of fiscal cliff that's we're going to see in December, January. So really important for Democrats to do that. So the NFIP, again, hopefully extended, probably be for a year, but it'll be tied to federal government funding. And then risk rating 2.0 on the regulatory front, another topic we have spent an inordinate amount of time on. Again, as you noted, really important to our members and many of their clients. It's already being implemented. It's a staggered implementation. And so for new policies, that were effective on October 1st or later. This new rating methodology, which rates these properties on more of an individual basis, right? FEMA would characterize it as a modernization of rating, on flood insurance, using more computer modeling and doing it individualized. It's already gone into effect, as many of our members know, on new policies. On existing policies, right now we're in a phase where you can either go with the traditional rating or you can use risk rating 2.0, whichever is cheaper. But come the spring of next year, April 1 and past, it's going to be mandatory, for all policies. And so we're starting to hear from some of our members that are seeing some interesting rating on properties. Whenever you do something, just take a step back. Whenever you make major changes like this, right, you're going to have some winners and you're going to have some losers. And so, there'll be some policyholders that see decreases, some, largely stay the same with their premiums, and there'll be some that see the increases. Of course, we're going to hear more from those that see the increases. And so we're going to stay in very close contact with FEMA as they implement this. There has been concern, from some in the industry on the implementation. We're one of those groups. But it's the cow's kind of out of the barn on this now, and it's going to be implemented. So we're going to have to work closely with the regulators and others in the industry to make sure it's done as effectively and as efficiently as possible. And again, we want to hear from our members. If you're experiencing problems, you have questions, please reach out to Lee. Please reach out to us at our federal team, and we'll keep passing along developments as they occur.
Well, and Charles, those of us down here, it's a little tough to argue against an improved rating system that makes the whole program somewhat, financially solvent when we're sitting there looking at a $24 to $26 billion deficit. So it was kind of one of those tough arguments and all. But thank you for staying on top of that and taking our calls when we have agents expressing their concerns and all that. So,
Lee, can I mention one other thing just that came to mind? And so, as you look at the the yearly increases, right now there's an 18% cap that's in place, right, on yearly premium increases. So that's still going to be in effect going forward. And there may be some talk, right, depending on some of these increases and how how large they are, and kind of the complaints that are coming from constituents and members of Congress. They always listen to the voters. And so, as we think about ways to kind of mollify and alleviate some of these increases, you may explore, reducing that cap, from 18 to a 9 or something along those lines, the yearly cap. Again, if more policyholders see these large increases than originally expected, or I mentioned the means testing kind of pilot and the additional funding for that's in Build Back Better. There could be some more discussion from policymakers here come next year on additional means testing of flood insurance premiums. So, I want to make sure that your viewers know that we'll explore all avenues and work with policymakers on ways to, if we really see this thing going off the rails, to try to lessen the harm to our policyholders and to, of course, to our membership that work with them.
That sounds great. Let's shift gears a little bit. You talked to me earlier about some changes coming from members that sell health insurance, and as it deals with disclosure requirements and all. Talk to us about what agents that are in that realm or have departments within that, what they're seeing and what they're going to have to be doing, Charles.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks, Lee. And this is a time-sensitive issue, and this all comes from the end of 2020, where the omnibus government funding bill that passed then, that was signed by President Trump, it did include some new health agent compensation disclosure requirements. And that's for both group health plans and also individual market plans. And the requirements take effect starting on December 27th of this year. So, next month. So really coming upon us. And so if you're in these markets, this is something you need to be really focused on. Now, the group health plan requirement applies directly to insurance producers and consultants. And that's administered by the Department of Labor. And we've been working with the DOL, trying to push them to issue more detailed guidance on what needs to be included in these disclosures. They haven't released that yet. Unfortunately, it doesn't change the need for us all to comply with it if you're in that market. And so we're trying to get more details from them. We'll stay on them. But regardless, this deadline's coming. And then for the individual market requirements, that's Health and Human Services, that's HHS, and in September, they did put out a separate proposed rule regarding those disclosure requirements. Now, these mandates, unlike the group, these apply to health insurance issuers and the carriers, so they're largely going to take care of those. And actually, speaking of timely, I would encourage those that are interested in these topics to read today's News and Views. Now, News and Views is our e-newsletter that goes out every Thursday afternoon. It covers a whole bunch of topics, but from a government affairs perspective, this is our main vehicle to relay to you what's happening in DC and how it may impact your businesses. And we are typically, drafting and authoring a couple of articles a week on, again, a whole bevy of plethora of topics. But this week, we have an article with a link to a detailed summary of what we put together on what you should consider putting in your disclosure. And so we've worked with our the government affairs team, worked with Wes Bissett, who I know many of you know well, our outside senior counsel for government affairs, and our Office of General Counsel. So it's been a kind of a team effort. But I'd encourage you to read News and Views this week and every Thursday afternoon for that matter. Again, it's our way to pass things along to you. And look, I know in this day and age, right, we're all just bombarded, right, with emails and on social media and texts, and I get it. I'm with you, but just open it up, just skim the articles. It'll take you 30 seconds, and then you can close her down. But if something kind of piques your curiosity, then read it, because again, this is the way that we can make sure you know what's happening in DC.
Well, and Charles, I know that personally, I will read those, review them and all, and then I file them electronically, and it's amazing how many times I'll have a question or something come up and it'll break my down, and I'll go back and look back and freshen up on that article. So it's great information that you provide, and it's very timely and all. And Speaking of timely, obviously, InsurePAC is our federal PAC, and Nathan Rydell and your team does a great job of the advocacy side of things and all. And talk to me about how important that is for your efforts and all there in DC.
Thank you, Lee. Yeah, appreciate the softball, but it's absolutely critical. I mean, it's hard for me to stress enough, how important that tool is for us to represent, our agents in DC. On a per cycle basis, it disperses about $2.4 million a year, so it's real money. It's one of the biggest, largest small business PACs in DC. And look, as insurance agents, you all know relationships, right, are critical with customers. It's the same thing with members of Congress. It's equally important with legislators, whether it's a state level and what you all do with Lee for state legislators or federal legislators. And with the help of InsurePAC, your lobby team, it just gives us the ability to develop relationships with federal policymakers. It doesn't mean they're going to vote with us, nor should it, but it just allows us that, on those critical times when they're, making decisions, it just kind of allows us to get their ear and just make the case for you. That's all it does, but it really is important for us and is a key tool for us. Now, looking at Texas in particular, last election cycle, of that 2.4 million dispersed, over $110,000 of that went to the Texas Congressional Delegation. Of course, it's a large delegation, an important delegation, and so we sent a lot of money back down to the Lone Star State. Last year we had about 200 Texas agents contributed about $78,000 to the PAC. So thank you for that. Texas is always one of our top states. As a matter of fact, you all were number 2 in the national championship race, trailing only South Carolina. I know the race is on again for this year. I know the solicitation just went out, so encourage you all, give till it hurts, because again, it really helps us as we are dealing and grappling with all these really weighty issues in DC that have such broad impact. It's an essential tool in our toolbox.
Well, it is critically important to you up there and to us down here to develop those relationships. And, you mentioned the congressional races. Texas picked up 2 additional congressional seats in the last census, and essentially assuming that the maps hold where they are, and they'll go through the courts, I'm sure, and there's already challenges there, but it looks to me like we could probably fairly confidently say that there'll probably be 1 additional R seat and 1 additional D seat. One of the new congressional districts here in the Austin area, this is such a blue area that it would be hard to win that, but the one down in the Houston area and all, I think from what I'm hearing, there's some good candidates that are already coming forward and all. So it's one of those deals. And speaking of that, one of my favorite things about my job is getting to come up there and see you guys in Washington at our annual National Legislative Conference. And are we going to be able to come back to DC this next spring and see y'all?
Well, thank you for that question as well, Lee. And fingers are crossed, right? But the plan is, yes, we will have an in-person legislative conference. And while the past 2 years, for good reason, right, we did the events virtually, and they were very successful. So thank you to all of you who tuned in virtually. No, the plan is it's going to be an in-person ledge conference. I can tell you, we're back to lobbying in person here in DC. A little slower on the Democrat side than the Republican side, but the Republican offices, and I think many Democrat offices by the spring of next year, are going to be taking those in-person meetings. So we are full steam ahead with the in-person event. So I'm going to give you those dates. Mark it on your calendar, April 27th through April 29th. Those will be the dates. Look forward to welcoming you all back, seeing some friendly faces in person. And there's no substitute, right, for the face-to-face lobbying. I think we're all getting a little tired of the virtual events, although this is greatly. I don't mind doing this virtually, but I couldn't be in Texas with you all. Probably better to do this virtually. And it's always going to be a part, right? We all know how business has changed. It'll always be a part of what we do now going forward. But that face-to-face lobbying, there really is no substitute. So when our agents come to town, no one makes a better lobbyist than our folks. And we feel like we do a good job for you all, but you can make the case so much better with your personal stories and examples. And so, yes, sir, we're in person and looking forward to it.
Well, we look forward to being up there with you and all. And Charles, thank you so much for taking the time today and being with us. And I hope you can stay on for a little bit. We've got a few minutes left, and I thought what I would do is kind of run through some of the key issues that we dealt with in the legislative session down here in Texas. It was a very strange session, starting off with the COVID protocols in place. We didn't actually, the session began the second week in January, and our government affairs team did not get into the Capitol until March. It was basically shut down. Then we went through the tent city, as we call it, where you had to self-test and wait 15 minutes to see if you got in. So it was, the session began very strange, and then it was followed up by the Winter Storm Uri, which basically shut the state of Texas down. And we were on the verge of losing our electric grid and all the nightmares that came with that. And, I've told people as we've done these presentations around the state, it really changed the entire emphasis and flavor of the session this time, because it was such a critical issue that things changed immediately to correcting ERCOT, and the Public Utilities Commission basically had to restructure all that because the boards either resigned or were fired, and so there was probably another month of the session dedicated to finding out what happened with our electric grid and what we have to do to fix that and all. And then finally, the regular session ended very suddenly with a walkout by the House Democrats over the election bill. And so it was just a strange bill, a strange session in total. But fortunately, we were able to get 3 or 4 major accomplishments done. First and foremost, House Bill 19, which was our trucking litigation bill. Any of our members that have commercial operations or commercial clients that had trucking knew how difficult it was getting because of some of these nuclear verdicts that were coming out on in some cases minor claims and accidents with tractor trailer rigs. They would be million and multi-million dollar trials. What we were able to do, it's not a perfect bill. We work very closely with the Texans for Lawsuit Abuse, who has been a partner of ours on so many of the tort reform things, but we basically put in place a new bifurcated trial. And that's a new term for me, but essentially, first the plaintiff has to prove liability before they can then go to the awards stage and the second part of the trial. And not being an attorney, it was all new to me, but the reality is it's a wait and see situation now. We've got this in place. We'll just have to see how it does in helping lessen these nuclear verdicts and restoring the ability for us to do our job and provide the limits and the coverage at an affordable price. So big bill, and hopefully it's going to change some things. Second bill, Senate Bill 6, was the Pandemic Liability Protection Bill. Medical providers and manufacturers and businesses, when this pandemic came about, all of a sudden it was one of those deals that they were in uncharted waters. Medical providers seeing people that were deathly ill and exposing themselves and others to the COVID virus, and manufacturers, many folks jumped in. I know in Austin, we have a lot of distilleries around here, and they basically shut down their distilling operations and began making sanitizing deal. Well, that brings in a whole new products liability exposure, and businesses that stayed open and restaurants come to mind. They were severely hit by this. What this pandemic protection liability does is if you followed protocols of either the CDC on a federal basis or the state, the governor had put out a lot of mandates in counties and cities. If a business can prove that they followed those guidelines, then they have protection from liability claims that are, alleging that you caught, COVID virus at your place of business, or because there was a faulty product or whatever. We felt like not that there was going to be that many claims that would go through the courts to be paid, but merely the defense cost on that. If that had taken place, then it would have been a huge burden on the defenses of this. So we're very pleased that we got that done. Another very important piece of legislation that the insurance companies brought to us, AIPCI, which is the property casualty companies, Senate Bill 1367, a commercial lines modernization bill, and there's 17 lines of business which are like cyber liability, kidnapping, ransom, fidelity coverage, etc., that the companies previously had to send their forms and rates in for approval with the Department of Insurance. Well, that was a timely process, and in some cases it could take a year to get those products to the marketplace. Well, those 17 lines of business now do not have to get prior approval, so it will speed the products to the marketplace. So we feel like that we will start seeing a lot more availability of these as the bill goes into effect, and we're moving forward and all. Another bill, House Bill 4030, is the TDI licensing bill, and it basically had a number of different parts to it. A cleanup for inconsistencies within the licensing act. Things like non-resident license in Texas. If that non-resident lost their home state license and for disciplinary actions or whatever and all, Texas did not have within its statute the ability to cancel the non-resident license. So now we've added that. We've added an additional hour of ethics requirement, and that on the surface, some agents said, well, we've got to take another hour. Well, if you have multi-state licenses, most states, other states had a requirement of 3 hours anyway. We only had 2. So this will get us up to par on a lot of the other states where they are on that. Eliminates, this was an important one that we were concerned with, but it hasn't panned out to be a big problem. It eliminates the sub-agent class of licensing when an agency would have to report to TDI any and all licensed agents as sub-agents. What we've done is modernized to what 47 other states were already doing, is now every licensed agent in your shop will have to be a direct appointment of that company. And obviously our concern in the matter was, are we going to have agents that have 300 licensed people in their shop and they represent 500 different companies? Are we going to spend the next year filling out applications for insurance companies? Fortunately, we've had very few problems with it, and that is because TDI helped advise and inform us that agents or companies can go to the NIPR, the National Insurance Licensing
Producer Registry. Yep.
Producer Registry. Thank you, Charles. And get that information, or they can go to CIRCON, which is the continuing education repository for that, and that has posed very few problems that we were concerned with and all. So from that standpoint, it cleaned up a lot of things for the TDI on the licensing side, and we're very happy to be able to help with that. But all in all, during the session, there was not anything that was of huge concern to IIAT, and we were able to help get some of these important things passed. As it relates to TWIA for our coastal agents, there were only a couple of major TWIA changes, and that has to do with the ability for the board to pass rate increases. There's a lot stricter requirements on that now. And so other than that, there wasn't any great big change. But all in all, we had a very good session, and appreciate the support of our members. As Charles mentioned, you know, being able to support business-minded candidates in their reelection and all helps us develop those relationships and keep protecting agents and all. So we're running right on time, and I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us today. And again, Charles, thank you so much for taking the time being with us. But more importantly, thank you for all that you do on behalf of agents, and your team up there is very responsive. They're great folks and work tirelessly on our behalf, and we appreciate that. As a final note, Joe Vincent is our annual conference coming up January 30th through February 1st, and you won't want to miss this one. We've got a great lineup of speakers and time to be together as agents and all. Registration is now open on the website, so please go to the website and get registered. And finally, if you have any questions of Charles or myself, then send us a email or send it to me, and I will pass it along to Charles, and we'll make sure and get any and all of your questions answered. But thank you, and appreciate your time today.